Let's talk to Matt Barrie. You see him on SportsCenter, you see him on College Football Final, and you also see him every Sunday morning on the Matt Barrie podcast. I believe it's the top college football podcast on ESPN. It may be the top podcast in the world for all I know. How are you, Matt?
That's definitely in the world, not only at ESPN, and we are the worldwide leader. And Paul, why is Mike Gundy getting your shrapnel right out of the gate?
I
Like,
mean,
what did Gundy do to you?
I don't know. It's been kind of a quiet feud that we've had for some time, and it's. I don't know. I mean, if it sounds like Gundy was on your podcast offering that opinion. That's what you usually get.
Let's try to get him on this Sunday. Like when I've got bedhead in the morning from sleep deprivation from all day Saturdays, and you're coming back from parts unknown from SEC Nation, we'll see if we can get Gundy on
Yeah,
with
that would be
that
good.
glorious mullet, and we'll solve all of college football's problems.
We need to solve a few right now, and I have one or two because some of the Finebaum listeners have been chirping about something you said a few weeks ago. We'll get to that in a moment. Let's start with the biggest story of last weekend, and that's Alabama back in its old familiar spot at number one. Your takeaway from last weekend?
My takeaway is this. I think what Kalen DeBoer did, because coming into the season, you'd say that Alabama fans were happy with the Kalen DeBoer hire, but in the back of their mind, you don't really know how it's going to go until you get in that first game, that first big SEC game, and you play it. I believe with what Alabama did, with Williams, the young receiver, Jalen Milroe, now the top of the Heisman Trophy candidate list, what Kalen DeBoer did on Saturday night, to me, gave Alabama fans closure on the Nick Saban era. They now know that they're in good hands. And for anyone that thought there was going to be this dip, and it was right to think that Nick Saban's the greatest of all time, 17 years there, the SEC championships, the national championships, that's natural. But I think after Saturday, Tuscaloosa, college football, Alabama, and everybody knows that Alabama's not going anywhere. And I think there was closure to what Nick Saban brought to that program and an official handoff to Kalen DeBoer now for his tenure.
And Matt, fine or not fine on where Kirby Smart and Georgia are right now, because their schedule is very difficult moving forward. We just had a stat. They cannot score in the first half.
Yeah, they do. I mean, we saw this out of them last year. There was a lot to be desired out of Georgia the first half of games. They would kind of just plod along, play with their food a little bit, and then like a boa constrictor, they would just wrap themselves around the other team, and they would make them pay, and they would ultimately win the game. We saw it again this year with Kentucky. It was a 1-point win against Kentucky, who we now know is good because they beat Ole Miss. We don't know what happened in the South Carolina game. But with Georgia, 28-0. And we said this, Paul, when we talked on Sunday, Georgia, to me, showed more in the second half that they are still one of the top 4 or 5 best teams in the country. To be down 28-0 on the road, nothing going right, to actually take a 1-point lead late in the game, to me, that says Georgia's still a team you're not going to want to play down the stretch. I know they've got a difficult schedule, but don't think for a second they're not coming out of that game pissed off the way it happened. They fought their way back. That showed more to me than anything. They didn't lay down, and that's going to have to be something you watch for the rest of the year.
Matt Barrie joining us, of course. You see him on SportsCenter. You see him into the wee hours of the morning on Saturday with Joey Galloway and Dan Mullen, which brings me to something that I heard on the Matt Barrie podcast. Before we get to the question, can you enlighten the audience? Because I can't imagine anybody has not heard your podcast or seen it on YouTube. But what is the deal on it?
It's an ESPN College Football YouTube channel, and we basically were first out of the gate Sunday morning. We get on there and we talk ball. You and I get on there and recap the day that was. And people are like, well, can I get it audio? Yeah, just play the video in your car on your Bluetooth and you can get audio. Plug in your earbuds. There's this big, Paul, I know that this is difficult for you to understand, but video podcasts can still be listened to via audio.
I didn't know that.
And it's been fun for us to get in there. And because what have we seen so far this year? We've had so many good topics to talk about, including a lot of us being wrong about Colorado, Arch Manning getting 2 starts at Texas playing well, Georgia slipping up, Ole Miss slipping up. So I encourage you to listen, because when I say sleep deprived, we get in at 11:30 a.m. in studio on Saturdays. We leave after college football final at around 2 a.m. I go to bed at around 3:30, set the alarm. First person I talk to on a Sunday morning is Paul Finebaum. How is that not the best way to end and begin your week?
And I'm not just doing this self-promoting because your name's on the podcast, but your producer, Rob Moore, told us the other day that it really is at the top of the food chain, isn't it?
Through 5 weeks, 1.7 million views. Not bad.
You work with Dan Mullen, obviously the
I do.
former Florida coach. I want you to tell the audience some of your thoughts as we were talking 2-3 weeks ago about Billy Napier's disastrous run this year, about what should have happened, what didn't happen, and really where we are right now with that school.
So my stance on, I'm going to take it away from Mullen, Florida, and Napier for a minute, just give you my stance overall on coaching hires and fires. I've always been one of those people that think that schools react too quick unless it's just an absolute unmitigated disaster that you can't get yourself out of. But with a firing of a head coach, you had better know that the person that you're getting is better than the one that you're getting rid of. And here's my stance on Dan Mullen. Yes, I call Thursday night college football with him. I've worked closely with him for the last 2 years. Is there some bias? Probably a little. Do I hear what's going on inside the program? I hear what's going on. But the thing with Mullen, and it's simple fact. The guy went to and won 3 New Year's Six games in a row his first 3 years. Hit that adversity in year 4, and they got rid of him. And so there are a lot of places in this country, and I know Florida is one of the best in the country, but there are a lot of programs around the country that would take 3 New Year's Six wins in the first 3 years and then some down seasons the year after. I get it. The recruiting was becoming an issue. Todd Grantham was becoming an issue. The offensive line was becoming an issue. Coach Mullen would be the first to admit that maybe he was loyal to those guys too long. But you can't tell me, the most ardent Florida fan, and there are a bunch of them, you can't tell me that with NIL and the resources that even the ones that wholeheartedly disagree with me aren't thinking just a little bit. What if we'd have hung on to Dan Mullen? There are 17 coaches in SEC history, Paul, that have 100 wins. 17. He's one of them. And because things started going a little bit south in year 4, they got rid of him. It could have been a conversation, pull him aside. You get rid of this coach, you get rid of this coach, and the improvement with recruiting needs to start, or you're going to be on a short leash. I just find it stunning now when you look back, revisionist history with it, that early success, there was no leash for one bad season.
And Matt, all you can really do is look at the athletic director's choice and then look at his record, and that's the scary part of what you're talking about. And I in no way agreed with you when I heard you say that, because I felt like a lot of the mob that Mullen had run its course. But what we've watched over the last 2 years has been a nightmare.
Yeah, and look, what we typically see, and I like Billy Napier. I know I'm going back to when he was at Arizona State, my alma mater. He was a receivers coach there, an offensive coach there, and then he went to Louisiana and had amazing success. The problem is there's a difference between going from a place like Louisiana and winning a lot of games and to going to in one of the best, biggest jobs in the SEC. I mean, look at Urban Meyer's trajectory from when he was at Bowling Green to Utah. He had proven himself that he could win at both of those spots. Then it was time to decide between Notre Dame and Florida. He went to Florida. Everybody knows what happened there. There are times where you kind of need to be in the cauldron and the gauntlet of a big-time job before you can accept and succeed. Everyone's going to say, well, Kirby Smart had never been a head coach. Look what he did at Georgia. Yeah, but he was in it. He was living and breathing the SEC at a coordinator level, so he was behind one of the greatest coach of all time, learning how to build a program. And I think that matters. I think Billy Napier is going to be a great head coach. I really do. I just don't know that he's going to have the time in Florida, based on how this has started, to see it through. And maybe they'll show patience this time, because there's another thing with coaching hires and fires. The second you do that, it's like drafting a quarterback number 1 in the NFL. The second you make the move, you're in essence probably setting your program back another couple of years until the new coach can get their footing. And we live in a world now with NIL and transfer portal where you're expected to win right now because of the paycheck and the accessibility to players in the portal. And you're going to see it a lot. You're going to see coaches all over the country get fired before they should because Booster writing the check for $5 million to go get the quarterback can't win. I mean, Jackson Arnold's a prime example. He was the number 3 ranked quarterback recruit in the 2023 class. He is an absolute stud. he has hit a little bit of a rough patch to the point where now he's not playing and Michael Hawkins is playing. Where you don't think there was anything NIL related to get a player of Jackson Arnold's caliber to Oklahoma. That's just the way of the world. And so you're going to see a lot of people in their patience little by little wear down. And I think it's going to be over the next 3-4 years, now that we're in this system without any governing body, back to Nick Saban and Mac Brown being the commissioner, you're going to see a lot of coaches lose their jobs quicker because of the state of college football.
Great stuff from Matt Barrie. Matt, really look forward to hearing your podcast this Sunday morning.
Paul, I didn't ask you. It's a tradition. I always ask where SEC Nation's going. Where are we taking the bus this
We
week?
will be in College Station for the Missouri game.
Oh, that'll be good. That'll be a good one.
Good game.
How much